Hey, this is John from Gadeon. Today I'm going to be discussing some common pitfalls with buying franchises and how to avoid them. And the reason why I want to cover this today is because recently I was asked to go through a lot of documentation pertaining to the potential purchase of a franchise recently. And once again, we don't really have notes. And part of the reason for that, by the way, because I would totally show you the documentation. The problem is that a lot of the packages that get sent out are confidential for those franchise agreements. So there's, like literally nothing to show. Um, anyways, so let's kind of talk about a few things first. So a couple of I would say, three things that really stood out were a lot of companies, and especially if you're dealing with smaller franchises. I won't give any examples. Um, they seem to have disproportionately high fees sometimes. Um, Consignment to specific like areas that would maybe make sense if the company were a larger franchise, but because they're not, I don't think it really makes sense from an investment standpoint necessarily. Though I'm sure that you can treat that with some context, right? And then the last one is issues with the terms. So, and I'm going to give you a few examples of that, but and actually, let's talk about that one first. So, what kind of issues with terms did I see come up? Well, things like, for example, in one of the agreements that I looked at, there were differences between what is supposedly covered under the franchise fee, or like what does the royalty pay for, and the what's included in that royalty fee. So what I mean by that is that this franchise agreement had all the stuff that was above this section on what was covered. So what how do I explain this? Had a bunch of things listed that is included in the royalty fee, things like marketing fees, for example, and training, right? But then if you go and look at where those items are actually located in the documents, what I found is that they didn't actually include those in the franchise fee, or they're not covered by the franchise fee. And so they're included, sure, but they're not covered. So you have to pay extra. So that was an interesting one. And another, so that was a very concerning set of terms for me. And then another one that I saw as well was also related to the terms of the agreement and the renewal period, where despite putting all these resources up front and having to really work the business on your own, it would terminate after a certain period of time. So the reason why that was concerning to me as well, and I'm talking about like how it was concerning to me. I'm not making these investments, right? But still concerning to me. The reason that's concerning is because you can kind of imagine somebody basically just swooping in and taking up all your hard work after you paid them to do so. So I think those are at least two specific terms in those agreements that you might want to look out for that I found in some of them. Okay, so make sure to read the terms carefully and really give them some thought. Now, you might want to consult legal advice when you go and do those things, because they can obviously get quite complicated. Anyways, I suppose I should actually be looking at what I'm doing here too. Now, excuse me. Another big issue was with potential like fees that are too high, basically. So I think what a generally decent franchise fee might look like is going to be probably like closer to maybe like a 10% royalty or less. Now, when you think about it, right, what are you actually paying for from the franchise? You're paying for basically things like branding and setup. Otherwise, if you're left without branding, or like some kind of marketing support, let's say, and without additional infrastructure, well, you might as well just be starting the business yourself and not paying maybe like for a smaller franchise like 150,000, but obviously much larger franchises can exceed that by quite a bit. But there's still cases where you'd be better off just going alone, if it's a small company in that case. So some of the things that I saw with fee arrangements were the highest that I saw, I think, was 24%. But I want to stipulate this by saying the 24% had two particular terms that were problematic. The first is that the 24% was on Revenue+tax. So you're actually paying probably closer to about 26-27% than 24%. So number one. And then number two is that term had disregarded the revenue collection. So what I mean by that is that under accrual accounting, we don't recognize revenue until that revenue revenue recognition only occurs when it's reasonably unlikely that the revenue, like a revenue reversal, will occur. So something could happen, like a customer issues a refund or something like that. So when you don't, because that will happen with a certain percentage of your payments that you receive. If you have to pay on top of that, you'll also be paying on revenue that you technically aren't going to actually recognize. So there's a problem there as well. So as you can kind of imagine, you'd probably end up paying something like total like 28% of your revenue, which is, I think kind of insane. Now, I'll also say with that too, so one of the other reasons why it might also be useful to get an advisor is going through the justifications for those. So one of the things that I came up with while I was looking at those statements was basically that, because we were listening to the for that particular one, the sort of rigmarole of the owner telling us that it was break even, and basically my conjecture was that it probably wasn't. And the reason why I figured that is that yes, it's like break even on the statements, but well, I can't prove this. I do figure two things. First is that it's kind of irrelevant to the investor anyways, but even if it were relevant, then what I figure is that it's probably inflated expenses. I won't really comment too much on that because well, we haven't specified any company that I'm talking about, but anyways, so it can be very worthwhile to go through the financial statements and sometimes to get a better picture of them. Just apply a sort of like reasonability test to start your investigations. And that's kind of true of everything. So for example, when I was in first year physics, I got 100% on the final exam. So how did I do that? Well, a lot of that's just applying reasonability tests. Is my answer reasonable? If not, then I should probably go and check it out. So similar thing with the financial statements here. When something's maybe not totally adding up, maybe that prompts a further investigation into things. So just kind of consider that. Now in that case, it's kind of like the relatively arbitrary whether the owner is or isn't inflating expenses. It doesn't really affect necessarily the franchisee, but in other cases it might, depending on what kind of financial statements you're looking at, what that information pertains to. Okay, so then maybe the last problem too with like the consignment to specific regions. So when you go and buy a franchise, right, you're typically buying a territory associated with that, even with service businesses, which I thought was a little weird, right? Not, and it makes sense for larger companies. Like if you were buying, like a McDonald's franchise, for example, right? Yeah, they don't really want like other franchisees competing with other franchisees out of the market. But if you're a small franchise, um, it just makes it harder for people to see the value of that, especially if you only have like, I don't know, like let's say like 5 franchises across the entire province. Yeah. So, anyways, keep a lookout for that as well. Now, what should you actually do to kind of avoid a lot of these pitfalls? Well, I mean, basically, in summary, it's to due diligence. Now, aside from getting an outside expert, right, and the idea there is to look at the terms and look at the statements. Aside from that, spend a lot of time researching the company, making sure that you understand what's going on with the business, and maybe try to reach out to other franchise owners as well, if you can. So, sometimes franchise owners will provide packages with some of the other franchise holders there. And then you can reach out to them and basically discuss their experiences with the franchise. Now, that can be misleading, of course, because there's differences across regions, for example. But you can certainly get extra information, and as long as you're kind of prudent with that information. And I guess I'll summarize it like this. The more capable you are of judging the reasonability of the evidence that comes before you, the better off you'll be with more information. Otherwise, it may not even necessarily be true. If you get more information, that you will be better off. In fact, you might just confuse yourself. That can totally happen. So, yeah. But probably get an advisor, reach out to other franchise owners, and see what their experiences were like. Okay, I think that's all I really have to say about franchises. I guess, it's also probably worth mentioning that a lot of those things can be applied to any private business purchases that you do make or consider making. And so that can, also stand for a lot of the people maybe watching this video, right? You may be also in a position where you'd potentially be able to purchase, via like a small leveraged buyout, for example, or, some equivalent of that, a small private business purchase, right? Same principles apply. So, you want to have a conversation with the previous owner, right? Why are they selling it, et cetera, et cetera. Check out the statements, probably get an external advisor. I mean, these are expensive decisions in a lot of cases. So, if you can't afford an advisor, you maybe can't afford the investment. So, yeah. Additionally, I guess it's also worth noting, if you do get an advisor, they'll likely walk you through the process of, what due diligence should look like in that kind of business, and can give you a better idea of different success metrics maybe that are going to be useful for that opportunity. As a side note, I have really no idea what to do here. So by the way, I do set all the puzzles to harder, so these are actually closer to like 2,600 rated puzzles. This is like, I don't know, this is I think I'm supposed to take here and then push, but maybe I gotta play the consignment, but probably. I guess as a quick chess lesson too, if the king is in the square of the pawn, then the king can reach it. So let's see what, no, okay, neither. All right, fair enough. Anyways, so hopefully you enjoyed that video. If you did and you found it useful, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends, families, sons, daughters. Okay. Bye.